So we've been exploring mindfulness this month because we're realizing that it's all about that we can only transform the globe through transforming ourselves. So global transformation through individual transformation. And the title of the talk, and as I said, all this year we've been getting the talk titles and the themes from our Centers for Spiritual Living because we're doing this as a group to really get the group consciousness to everybody around the world is doing this group consciousness so that we can really shift that underlying consciousness. And what happens when you do that a lot, when you go for healing something, what happens that everything unlike it comes up so we can see it, because that's the first step in healing it. So all of this chaotic stuff that you're seeing, it's good. It's good. We're seeing it because that's the only way we're going to know that it needs to be healed, and we can move forward on it. The quote for this week from our wonderful global vision is, "We encourage our community members to live courageous, fearless lives and to be passionate about its possibilities." To be passionate about the possibilities of life. And, a few of us are getting a little long in the tooth, as they say, and, you think, well, what are my possibilities? Well, the possibilities are still endless. While there is life, there is still that endless possibility. And it may transform in the way it shows up, in the way that we can manifest, but we are all fully capable of continuing to expand and evolve. One of the quotes from Ernest is, "We should always be breaking down old patterns of thought and creating new ones of a greater vision." Breaking down old patterns of thought and creating new ones of a greater vision. So I came home from our movie the other night, and I turned on a PBS, and I watched the end of a Hamilton show. I only saw the very end of it because I got home so late, but the thing after it was a program about a woman named Laura Klock, K-L-O-C-K. Now, Laura grew up in a family where her dad was a stock car racer. And in order to be friends with her dad, in order to be close to him, she would hang out in the garage where he was always working on a car or a motorcycle or something. And so she was hanging out with him and watching what he did and learning from him. And then her and her brother would take apart whatever they could get their hands on. So they might have been taking apart bicycles, and then they were taking apart motorcycles, and they were taking apart ATVs and snowmobiles, and they were learning all about engines. So she grew up learning about engines. So it turned out that her dad drove a Harley, and she loved the sound of that Harley. So she went to the 100th anniversary of Harley Davidson in Milwaukee in, I think it was 2003. And at that, she met a man named Brian Klock, who was not her husband at the time, but she had two daughters, and I think she brought them with because the daughters were also interested in motorcycles. So she had a motorcycle, and so she bought her kids a dirt bike. She bought her 7-year-old a dirt bike, and then she would ride the 5-year-old on the back of the dirt bike. And she ended up moving to where South Dakota, which is where this guy Brian Klock lived, because he designed motorcycles. And he designed these amazing, beautiful, beautiful motorcycles. And so the Discovery Channel found him, and he won their, they call it the biker build-off. So he won the biker build-off for a motorcycle that he built that had saddlebags. So he wanted to figure out what this thing could do in terms of speed, because people are thinking, oh, a motorcycle with bags on it's not going to go that fast. So he and Laura and the girls all went out to the Bonneville Salt Flats, and she rode the motorcycle on the Bonneville Salt Flats and took it up to 143 miles an hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats. And, you could tell he was going he was terrified. He was terrified that she was riding this motorcycle. But she was thrilled. She was thrilled. In fact, she was so thrilled that they went back again 2 years later and she broke her record. She made a record for a motorcycle of that kind and a woman riding the motorcycle of that kind. So she had the record on that. 2 years later, they went back and she broke her record. Then when her daughter was 16, she went back and her daughter raced on the Bonneville Flats, and her daughter had a record. So it was a mother-daughter record, speed records on the Bonneville Flats on these motorcycles. And then the third daughter, when she turned 15, she started racing on the Bonneville Flats. So now it's a mother-daughter-daughter. They all love these motorcycles. They love the speed. When they weren't racing, they were seeing what other people were doing, asking questions of the old timers, figuring out how to do this better, figuring out how to make it go faster, asking the old guys, how can I get this thing to go faster? And they would tell him, this one guy said to the 15-year-old, he said, you got to get your butt up. So she had to, sort of stand up and lean forward so that she could get faster. And sure enough, that's when she broke another record. So they've had several records broken, mother, daughter, daughter. We don't think about women motorcycle racing. We don't think about women breaking records on the Bonneville Flats. But that's happening. Nobody's doing a big movement about it. It's not a big, women's liberation kind of movement. It's just somebody loved something and had an opportunity to do it, and no one in that field was restricting anybody. They just said, if you can do it, do it. And if you can't do it, you can't do it. But we'll give you a shot. And sure enough, she did a shot. But that wasn't all. What she did was, because she'd become so famous, Laura came back to her community in South Dakota, and there was a place called Abbott House that's a rehabilitation facility for girls 7 to 17. It's a residential facility for these girls. And they asked her to speak there as an inspiration to the girls. Well, she said, I was more terrified of speaking than I was of racing. But she went and she talked to the girls, and she didn't know if she was saying the right thing, but she was connecting with the girls, and she realized, you know what? I bet I could get a beat-up motorcycle and bring it over here, and I could get these girls to fix it up, and then we could raffle it off as a fundraiser for the school. So she started this organization that's called, oh my goodness, where did I put it here? It's Helping with Horsepower. Helping with Horsepower. And so she got all these girls to fix these motorcycles up. She taught them how to fix the motorcycle. And these girls have come through this experience with a whole new self-confidence. They've come through with the ability to problem solve. They've come through with the realization of working with a team. They've come through with how to handle success and failure, how to try something and see when it works, and if it doesn't work, how to do something else, how to figure out something else that might work. So they all benefit from this, because here's a bunch of girls who the world thinks are damaged goods, just like these motorcycles. And they can take these funky old motorcycles and make them into beautiful running machines that are valuable. And they take that lesson to themselves as well. Just because I was considered damaged doesn't mean I have to stay that way. That I can create something new for myself, that I can show the world that I'm beautiful and that I'm valuable. That's when we take the lesson, we take our good and we share it. We take the good that has come to us, all of that ability to race and to break records and to be known, and then take that and use it for good in the world. Our book this month is Peace is Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh. And we've been learning mindfulness practices. And the first week we learned conscious breathing and smiling. Conscious breathing and smiling. Did you know smiling is a spiritual practice? Yes, it is. So we have breathing, which we do anyway. So we just think about it. Oh, yeah, I'm breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out, and smiling. And then, last time I talked to you, we went through a whole bunch of different practices about our emotions and accepting our emotions, making friends with our emotions, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant. We're more than welcoming to the pleasant ones, but the unpleasant ones are a little more challenging. So we were learning how to welcome our unpleasant emotions as well, and to recognize the gifts that they bring to us. And we also learned how to transform fear and anger through these mindfulness practices by welcoming, saying, hello, fear. Nice to see you again. Shake hands. I see you. I acknowledge you. And I'm willing to let you go. I'm willing to let you go. So this is how we become fearless beings. How we become fearless is accepting our fear, realizing our fear. When Laura clocks out on the racetrack, she says, yeah, I have some fear, but I can't let it stop me, but I can let it guide me so that I'm not foolish. I'm staying conscious because I know what the consequences are if I don't. So we can use our fear in a way. So we learned all about that. So today our practice is what's not wrong. You know, we all get involved with figuring out what's wrong, right? And fixing it. We're great fixers, you know? And we love to fix everybody else. You know, because we can see what's wrong. It's a little harder in our own lives to look within and see. And let's see what's not wrong for a change. Let's see what's not wrong. He says, we're very familiar with this wrong feeling because, it makes us feel depressed or angry or filled us with sorrow or grief or whatever. We see what's wrong and how it makes us feel. So let's look at what's right. I've had a cold this week, so I'm blowing my nose a lot. Excuse me. Now, did I think about how wonderful it is to breathe through my nose before I had this cold? I didn't. But I'll tell you, I will as soon as it's done. And every time I can breathe, I say, thank you. Yes. What a blessing to breathe. We can flip on a switch and a light comes on. I can open a faucet and hot water can come out. Look at all the things that are not wrong with where we are and what we do. I got a little something in the mail the other day, and it said, according to this program, my life expectancy has increased 17 years since I was born. My chances of being murdered dropped 50% in the last 30 years. That's a good thing. My chances of being robbed dropped 50% in the last 30 years. And believe me, I had a period there 40 years ago where I was getting robbed quite frequently. I am 10 times more likely to die in a traffic accident than in war. And traffic deaths are the lowest they've been in 80 years. All of the safety precautions we've taken have had their result. So I'm more likely to expire in my bathtub than at the hands of a Muslim terrorist. And if I am murdered by a Muslim, there is more than a 90% chance I am a Muslim. So when we enjoy what's right with the world, when we celebrate what's right with the world, it makes us happy. And what Thich Nhat Hanh says is the secret to happiness is happiness. Happiness itself. We can choose to look at what's good and be happy. We have that choice. Friday night, we showed this wonderful movie called Dalai Lama Awakening. And it took place in 1999, I found out. It was a documentary about the synthesis dialogue that it was held that year. And the synthesis dialogue was bringing together representatives from business, education, environment, governance, medicine, media, science and technology, and spirituality and religion to address the problems facing the world in the presence of and with the help of the Dalai Lama. So they went to Dharamsala, India, with the Dalai Lama, and they had these sessions where they came together and they tried to figure out how to solve the problems of the world. And the way they were doing that was they would get all the people from that one discipline together, and then those people from that one discipline would come up with a something, and then the people from multidisciplines would get together and come up with a multidisciplinary something, and then they would, come up with some kind of manifesto at the end of this process. Well, guess what? There were human beings involved in this process. And they only gave themselves a week, for goodness sake. And so they had all kinds of heavy-duty ego trips and, Amit Goswami and Fred Allen Wolf, two physicists going clunk, clunk, clunk. And it was very interesting. It was very interesting watching their process and watching their expectations and their frustrations. These problems, we should be able, we're the smartest people. We should be able to come up with solutions for these things. But I think what they didn't realize is that when you're working on the problems, what you're working with is the effect. When we're looking at the problems, we're looking at the effect. And we always want to go to cause. We want to go back to cause. And it was very interesting because they ended up being very frustrated and very disappointed, and but the Dalai Lama was like, no, it's okay. It's okay. He says, what we have to remember is we all want to be happy. Everybody in the world wants to be happy. They all want to avoid suffering. Nobody wants to die. We all have that in common. It says we have to deal with humanity. We have to deal with all of it. And so, for instance, Brother Teasdale had come up and he said, in a meditation I got that, you know how in South Africa we stopped apartheid by everybody boycotting South African goods? He said, I think we should boycott Chinese goods. Of course, these days, the store would be empty. But, let's boycott Chinese goods. And he said, no, this is about humanity. And that particular nation has more humanity than anybody else. They're the most populous nation on earth, so it has more humanity, and so we shouldn't harm the people of China by affecting their economy. So he was thinking about the people, not the political system, not the economic system. He was thinking about, I don't want to harm the people. Do no harm. Can we make a change that does no harm? So, he wasn't willing to head up a boycott of Chinese goods. No, I'm not doing that. Because I don't want to cause any harm to anybody. He said, the problem is your solutions are too short term. We're all looking for the quick fix. We need to look at the long term. We need to look way out. We need to look beyond what we currently know to something greater, to something that inspires us, a vision that pulls us to that world that works for everyone. And we don't know how that looks, and we've talked about some of the pieces that we think are part of it. But I think, as with all great things, art sort of shows the way. That art gives us insights into how to expand our vision, how to see anew, because that's what's required. We have to see anew through these things. And what they realized was that they could not fix the world if they hadn't fixed themselves. They said, one of these women said, we have to fix our own Tibet. Where am I judgmental? Where am I exclusionary? Where am I making people wrong? Where am I being a cause of separation rather than inclusion? That's where we want to get. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this concept of interbeing. What he says is, the poet sees a cloud in this paper because without a cloud, there wouldn't be rain. And without rain, there wouldn't be a forest. And without the forest, there wouldn't be any paper. And so he takes it further. He says the cloud and the paper interbeing. They connect. But if we take it further, we can see the sun, because the forest cannot grow without the sun. And we can also see the logger who cut the tree and brought it to the mill to be transformed into paper. And we know that the logger cannot exist without his daily bread, and so we bring the wheat in. And we know that he had a mother and a father, so we're bringing them in. And looking, we can see that we're this paper because we're perceiving it right now. I'm perceiving it, you perceiving it. We're both perceiving the paper. So we are all one with the paper that is one with the logger and the forest and the sun and the cloud. And we're all connected to everything. We're all connected to everything, interbeing. In Africa, they have a principle called Ubuntu. And in Ubuntu, they say, I am because you are. You are because I am. And there's a little story about that in this wonderful book called The Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. And he met a man from South Africa and asked him what that was. What is Ubuntu? And he said, it's a very deep African custom. It's a very deep African custom. He says, it's I am because you are because I am. He said, I've been finding that in every path, in every way, in Martin Buber's sense of I-thou, where only in keeping what is between us real can God appear. Where only in keeping what is between us real can God appear. It is the gift of Jesus, where two or more of you come together, there I am. In the one compassion of Buddha, in the numinous love that ancient stones emanate if we are still enough to bow to them. Ubuntu, I am because you are, even in how we live off the breath of plants. You are because I am, even how the plants live off our exhalations. So we are bringing something in and we're putting something out always. What are we as individuals taking in and what are we as individuals putting out? Are we putting out vibrations of love and peace and wholeness? Are we putting out positive thoughts and vibrations? Are we inviting a bigger picture into our awareness that allows us to move forward in ways that are bringing us all together, that are enriching our lives with the diversity that is present, that we are honoring this diversity. We're not just tolerating diversity, we're honoring and celebrating diversity because it makes the tapestry of life so rich. I mean, look at all the foods that we have. I mean, when I was growing up, we had brown meat and gray vegetables. You know, that was what I grew up with. And now we've got Thai food and we've got, Ethiopian food and, all these beautiful different kinds of tastes and wonderful opportunities to expand our awareness of life and to realize this total human family that we are. We talked about last week that, seeing from space, there are no borders. There are no definitions. There's just, mountains and streams and oceans and all of it in this one beautiful ball we call Earth. Suspended in space, spinning through space, actually. It's amazing. When we connect with our own inner knowing, when we take the time to look within, when we become mindful in our breathing and in our smiling and in our realizing what's not wrong, what's right with the world, we can be guided to even greater realizations of what's possible. And that's our work, to be guided to what's really possible for each of us as individuals and for humanity as a whole. And so our affirmation today is, I think it's on page 2, I am uplifted, sustained, and supported by the power of Spirit within me. I am uplifted, sustained, and supported by the power of Spirit within me. I am uplifted, sustained, and supported by the power of Spirit within me. I am uplifted, sustained, and supported by the power of Spirit within me. And so it is.